Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Voices 2020. My name is Chandri Lahiri, and I'm going to be your host today. Now, under normal circumstances, we would be bringing you this show live like we have done before, but I think we all know that these are not normal circumstances. And it gave us pause. We actually thought really hard about this, and we decided to go virtual in a time where everyone is kind of a little bit topped out on virtual events, simply because we feel that these stories are more important than ever before in the world that we're in today. And we really, really wanted to share with you. So, a little bit about the show, if you have not been to Voices before. It is produced by a theater group called Off Kendrick. Off Kendrick explores experimental theater in Bengali, which is the language spoken in the state of West Bengal in eastern India. It's the brainchild of our artistic director, Shankho Bhomik, who was inspired by The Moth, which is this wonderful storytelling show. And he thought it was time to bring a storytelling show themed on South Asian immigrant experiences in an attempt to build community, to start dialogue, to break down stereotypes, and many other things. The first show was in 2016. It was held in Somerville. Subsequent shows were in Waltham, and it repeats every other year. This year was going to be in Cambridge in March, but, well, the pandemic had other plans for us. The stories are usually born from ideas that are pitched to us, that are brought to us by people, and then we develop them, or sometimes we'll go after stories that we know are good ones. We have curators who actually work with the tellers to develop their stories, and then we have a director who puts the whole story together, the whole show together. And in fact, this year we have kind of a treat. This is a very special show because our curators, as well as our tellers, are all first-generation immigrants. And what we mean by that is that their parents were not born in America, but they were. And they have a unique voice and perspective, and the entire show is put together by them. We're going to show you a slide right now to introduce you to the three curators we had this year. We had Shaptak Roy, who actually was a teller in our first show. We have Shayok Chakraborty, who is a teller in the current show. We have Annisha Bhomik, who actually was the MC of our first show. These people have done a wonderful job putting this show together, and we're so happy that they could do this for us. So the last thing I'd like to tell you before we start our show is that as you watch these tellers tell their stories, please think about whether you have a story that you'd like to tell. Maybe you could be on this show. Think about it, pitch us ideas. All we ask is that it be about a South Asian experience. We will be sharing our website throughout this show as well as our email so that we can get in touch. I hope we're going to have a really good show today, and I'm going to jump right in. Okay, so I am really pleased to introduce our first storyteller today, Kostav Dotto. In Voices, we like to give names to our stories. Hi, Kostav.
Hello, how are you?
Kostav's story is called Blind Spot, and a little bit about him so that you get to know him. Kostav is 16. He's in the 11th grade in Nashua, New Hampshire. He's into sports, music, and science. And when I asked him for some fun trivia about himself, he told me that sometimes he likes to eat the Bengali way. You're going to hear the word Bengali a lot today. It's, like I said, it means from the state of West Bengal in India, and it's where some of our tellers are from. So the Bengali way of eating involves mashing your rice with your fingertips and mixing it with the curry. It takes some skill. And it turns out Kostav's mom here still has to do it for him. But the coolest part is Kostav told me he is not even a little bit embarrassed about it. And I don't know about you, but I think that's super cool for a 16-year-old. So now I can't wait for you to hear another story that Kostav has about his mom. And I'm going to let Kostav tell it now. Over to you, Kostav, as you tell us.
Thank you so much.
Why.
Before my brother and I took an interest in the game, football was all about halftime shows in our home. Super Bowl 44. I was all but 5 years old, picking up bits and pieces of the game for my brother. The Friday before, there was bubbling excitement among fellow kindergartners regarding Super Bowl parties. Well, Parties weren't really new for me. We either hosted one or attended one pretty much every weekend. But a Super Bowl party, now that was new for me. Come Monday, while my friends discussed how the Saints outplayed the Colts, I brought up whose performance, which nobody seemed interested in. The following year, we got a bit better. Along with Usher's show at halftime, we got to watch the national anthem performed by Christina Aguilera before my mom mercilessly flipped the game for a reality show dismissing football as jungly, muttering to herself, "Chok to shok jungly kela." The Patriots made it to the Super Bowl the following year. My brother and I realized that the only way we could watch the game was to get my mom hooked onto it. Not a cakewalk when cricket was a religion back home for my parents. I mean, come to think of it in today's context, that's not such a bad thing after all. It's much less divisive, right? Growing up, my dad and almost everybody in his generation spent their sun-kissed evenings playing cricket in the bylanes of his neighborhood. My mom used to be glued to the screen for hours watching all the matches, and she continues to do so even now, thanks to Hotstar. Honestly, I never quite liked the game. While I found the game quite boring, it was, for my parents, the ultimate game. So I knew it would be quite a chore to unseat cricket and have football take its place. But it was definitely worth it. As I sat my mom through a crash course of the sport, she waged the first allegation that football was a long game. I was thinking, seriously? You watch test match. There's no final result after 5 days. Initially, I thought that this process was going to be hopeless, as she would go on tangents talking about her favorite cricketers and inaccurate but confident information about Tom Brady, which was the only football player she knew at the time. But soon, I noticed that she was trying to make sense of the game in her own quirky way, finding a cricket equivalent for every football move. A touchdown translated to a sixer, a field goal to a four, an interception to a caught, and a fumble to a dropped catch. I didn't really agree with some of the comparisons she made, but if it helped her understand the game any better, I was all for it. It took a few more lessons and a few more seasons for her to get the concepts of pick six, neutral zone infraction, 2-point conversion, and squib kick. I have to say, though, that this knowledge offloading was a two-way traffic. The barters seemed to have worked. Ironically, the one who was teaching was also the one becoming taught. I realized that for years now, I too have been throwing around sports terms with a lack of knowledge, such as asking, how many points does India have now? Or, I thought the game ended 30 minutes ago. The commentator said over. But now I can tell a hook from a pull, a yorker from a googly, and a wide from an outswinger. I find the game pretty interesting now. My mom, on the other hand, likes Tom Brady, but says that he takes 5 to 7 seconds to throw the football, which is completely inaccurate. She convincingly asserts that the Seahawks have the best defense and still asks if the Bills are from Chicago. Let's put it this way. It is still a work in progress, both ways, hopefully in the right direction. So now, Brady's, Newton's, and Jackson's peacefully share screens with Coley's, Gales, and Stokes on our TV. I get to watch all the games, including college football, though mom only watches when the Patriots play. I do take an interest in the ODIs and T20s, but test cricket is still a stretch. But this has been quite a learning experience. Beyond cricket, beyond football, beyond any sport. A great takeaway from this knowledge-sharing exercise is that when we tapped into unexplored terrains with unbiased minds and open hearts, things didn't seem either boring or wild anymore. Accepting, exchanging, and embracing our cultural differences has only increased my knowledge base. And as immigrants, this journey is always fraught with such sharing and patchwork. Sometimes this mishmash between cultures is a bit weird, but I guess that's how we continue to weave the fabric of immigrant life, watching the Super Bowl while I'm happily gorging on tengeramach and kashamancho. Thank you for listening to my story and have a great day.
That was awesome. Thank you so much, Kostov. I relate to that in many, many ways, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners and watchers do too. We're going to do a little Q&A after each story so that we get a chance to get to know some of our storytellers. And what struck me about yours was that you said something about the teacher became the taught and how it was kind of like a two-way street between you guys. You were teaching your mom about an American game. That was the idea. And you end up learning about an Indian game and about her culture and about her. I'm interested, would you say your relationship has changed in any way because of this from where it was before?
Yeah, well, this cultural bridge, so to speak, between these two cultures, it started with sports, as my story stated. But I soon realized that you can't only learn about sports from a culture and not learn about anything else, like other aspects. So I soon started taking an interest in Indian food and Indian music, while my mom did the same for American food and music. I now know more about Indian food and music than I ever have before, and my mom claims that she knows a lot about American pop music. Yeah, sure, whatever. But we both now understand each other's cultures. And with this, football, the game that I talked about, when she became familiar with the game, she gained a lot more interest in it. And she was starting to watch more and more Patriots games. I remember one day in 2015, she kept bugging me during a regular season football game, and she kept asking questions. And I was like, Mom, no, you have to learn the 32 teams of the NFL. Please, I beg you. And she did. Surprisingly, the next football game that we watched, she was able to tell the two teams that were playing against each other, and I was shocked. But this definitely led to more interesting conversations, better than the usual ones about discussing grades.
That's not a fun conversation.
Yeah.
Oh, that's absolutely awesome. Wow, who'd have thunk it, huh? Cricket and football. That's awesome. Thank you so much for your story, Gustav. And I know that when we talked about this once before, you said something about how you almost feel like it made you non-judgmental or something, that you understood. You understood
Right.
that?
As soon as I started learning about cricket and it wasn't just people hitting a ball outside of a little circle, I understood that the game actually had an objective. And once you learn more about a sport, you start to gain more interest in it, just like my mom did about football.
My goodness, and it feels like that could apply to everything, right? Learn more
Right.
about everything and it stops being weird and odd and bad. That's amazing. Thank you so much, Costa. Thank you for
having me.
All right. All right, time to move on to our next storyteller. I hope you really enjoyed Kostov's story. Our next storyteller is Ohuna Dam, and her story is called Clash of the Cuisines. A little bit about Ohuna. Hi, Ohuna.
Hi.
Ohana is 15 years old, and she's a sophomore at Newton South High School. She writes poetry, she creates art, and she really, really loves trying out new recipes from the internet. I wish Ohana would come to my house and help me with that, actually. But until I can steal her, let me tell you that her pet peeve, I love this, is people who walk slowly in the hallways. And Ohana, I have the best story for you for when I almost got fired because I tailgated my boss and I stepped on her shoe and she almost tripped and fell. So I hear you. What else? Oh, this is really great. She told me that her parents keep reminding her to save the best for last when she's eating, and Ohana always refuses. So you may have picked up on the fact that food is kind of important, and today's story is going to touch upon that. But I'm going to let Ohana tell you the story in her Clash of the Cuisines. Take it away, Ohana.
Thank you. Throwing in the fenugreek, cumin, nigella seeds, black cumin, and fennel into the oil, a crackling noise explodes from the wok. Little droplets of hot mustard oil splatter everywhere, sparkling in the air like fireworks. The aroma of spices fills my nose, and the smell of fresh ginger is inviting and warm. The translucent onions are soft but still crunchy, awaiting to be draped in the luxurious tapestries of spices. Soon, thousands of shades of red, yellow, and orange paint the wok. A rich curry develops, and my hunger awaits a feast. Dropping in the chunks of mutton into the curry, a warm rush of excitement fills my body. Slowly turning from a bright terracotta color to a mocha brown, it cooks all the way through. A large dish of mutton curry with rice is set before me. I separate the mutton from the rice and devour the pieces, leaving the curry for last. My teeth sink into the meat, and the soft layers of fat coat my tongue. Mutton curry, a lasting favorite to indulge on Sundays. Sundays were always chaotic in my house, with Baba running errands, Ma frantically finishing her ranna, and Didi and I doing our homework last minute. But there was always something so pure and delicate about those Sundays that not even disorderly pandemonium could ruin those feelings. Baba prepared the plates as he scooped rice, bachmishali, or mixed vegetables, dal, lentil soup, and mangsho, goat curry onto each. This is a typical lunch in my family. However, there are hundreds more types of preparations that Bengalis enjoy eating. I first tasted with my eyes and caught myself glancing over at each preparation. The real showstopper on the plate was the mangsho. Swimming in the river of red curry, the mangsho looked spectacular. Obviously, as an instinct, I proceeded in devouring all of my mangsho pieces first. Coming from Baba, an annoyed look was directed towards me. Everyone always kept telling me that I should leave the best for last. However, I always refused. I only ate the mangsho and gave Baba the chol. Food ties people together, creating unforgettable moments and good times. People will come over to our house and will remember a dish Ma made 2 years ago. And this amazes me because it shows how memorable food can be. I've always had a mixed relationship with Bengali food. I don't like many of the key components of a typical Bengali dish. For instance, bhat or rice is a must-have staple food for Bengalis, and I eat rice every day. However, I really don't like it. I would prefer anything over rice, whether it be bread, pasta, or even roti or tortillas. I often feel like my relatives get disappointed in me when they hear that I like Italian food or Mexican food, because it seems as though I prefer it over my Bengali cuisine. At the same time, I could never tell my friends how much I love eating juicy or bone marrow. There are certain dishes from both the Bengali cuisine and international cuisines which I enjoy eating. I don't prefer one over the other. Additionally, many Bengali dishes can be spicy. I cannot tolerate spice at all. Whenever I eat something spicy, I feel my throat burning and I rush for the cooling yogurt in the fridge. Being a South Asian living in America, I'm thought to like spice or indulge in certain dishes, which I don't do. Just because I'm Indian does not mean that I like spicy foods. I'm more of a sweet tooth anyways. But at the end of the day, Bengalis are known for their fish. Here's a little secret. I don't like fish. I'm sorry. But I truly cannot forget my experience at the Mache Bazaar, or the fish market in Kolkata. It's like a completely different scene taken out of a fantasy novel. One summer, when I went to Kolkata, my uncle insisted on taking me to the Mache Bazaar. We entered this dull, tarped area. As soon as I walked in, a putrid stench of fish rushed into my nostrils. There were scales scattered on the ground, and mysterious entrails of red and white were crawling out of the fish as the vendors cut into the animal. I noticed a small kitten near my feet. It hungrily eyed the fish, but soon it slumped away, realizing it couldn't take any. A crow overhead swooped in, and the match vendors angrily shooed it away. My uncle and I looked all around, looking for the freshest and best quality of fish. Ki, machta bhalo to? Koto kore? Big and sweaty-looking men were sitting under a yellow light bulb hanging from a wire. The bulb produced just enough light so the men could see their precise incisions. They wore white, worn-out-looking gengis or undershirts and had a big boti or curved blade to cut their fish. Many of the vendors had cut shiny, illuminated pieces of fish. We got our fish in black packets and brought them back home. Even though I don't particularly enjoy many of the fish delicacies known in India, I truly cannot forget the setting of the Mache Bazaar, which perfectly describes the Bengali experience. The next day, my uncle decided to take me out in the evening to snack on some mishtis, or sweets, another staple food for Bengalis. And I love mishtis. They're my absolute favorite. We walked past several shops, and I noticed large yellow and black wasps hovering over some of the mishtis. I definitely did not want to enter that mishti dokan, or sweet shop. But finally, we stopped in front of a large shop named Bancharam's. The doors were gleaming pearly white, and we were invited in with a rush of cold air. The lights accentuated the delicious mishtis. There were some sprinkled with red and green sugars, others shining with silver foil, and more that were drenched in clear syrup. I asked my uncle for a warm rasgulla, a spongy Bengali sweet, and he handed me one in a small tan-looking paper bowl. I squeezed out some of the rash or syrup and bit into the spongy, delicious mishti. I devoured the mishti in seconds. In the end, I enjoy the unique traditions of my Bengali culture and the ambiance of Kolkata. There are certain aspects of both the Bengali culture and the American culture which resonates with me. And assimilating the cultures of both the Eastern and Western worlds allows me to feel more in balance with myself and the external world. I am an adolescent of Bengali descent, but beyond that, I'm an individual shaped by the constant clash of different cultures and influences. It is in a chaotic system I was born into, and in this chaotic system, I thrive. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahona. That was so great. And of course, you've made me wildly hungry. And I'm looking at the YouTube comments, and you're blowing many diets today, my friend. But so the question that I thought to ask you is, you said that your dad, your baba, actually served you, made up those little plates. Actually, before that, I want to clarify for people who may not know what mangsho is, this thing that Ahona loves instead of the fish that she's supposed to love, because the Bengali stereotype is a fish lover. Mangsho is goat curry that's cooked in a very spicy curry, and it's typical on the Sunday menu for lunch, just like a roast in the old days here. So my question was, Ahona, that your dad used to serve the plates, make up the plates. Whereas I know that in most Bengali families, in my extended family, it's usually the mom who's cooking, cleaning, making up the little plates, fussing. What do you make of your dad being that person? Was he big in the kitchen? Like, do you find that interesting now?
Yeah, so ever since I can remember, Sunday lunch always means mangsho and pat. And today's Sunday, so even today I ate mangsho for lunch. So in our family, it is Ma who does most of the cooking. And my earliest memories are of me in the kitchen with Ma. And I'm always just so curious to see what she's creating in the kitchen. So during lunchtime on Sundays, Ma is usually too busy with her ranna or cooking and other household work. And Sundays are a busy day because everyone's trying to get ready for office and school the following day.
Mhm.
So during that time, Baba steps in, and that is special to me because we all really enjoy eating mangsho together at the table, conversing with each other, and having this special moment connecting through food. So what's really special is the aspect of being together as a family and sharing that moment.
So mangsho to you is that glue that kind of brings you together?
Yeah.
That is really interesting. I wonder if that's the idea of the family Sunday dinner everywhere, right? It's just that
Yeah.
mangsho is the thing for you. So I hadn't planned on asking you this, but I have to real quick. You said something really interesting about how, as a Bengali, you're supposed to like fish and you're supposed to like sweets because Bengalis are, well known for those, and you don't. What do you make of that? How do people like? How do you stand up for yourself when people are like bad Bengali?
Yeah, so I actually love sweets. I can, like, every time I go to Kolkata, me and my uncle we both love sweets, and he always
Oh,
take me to
like
mishti dokans and stuff. But for fish, um, every time, like, before we go to Kolkata, my mom, sister, and my dad, they all love fish, and they keep
Mhm.
talking about all the special fish that they're going to eat in Kolkata, like kajuli mach or ilish mach and stuff like that. And I'm not really a big fan,
No, you're not
but
getting excited about that.
yeah, but the Macher Bajar, it's really different. It's a very different scene, which I'm not used to
Yeah,
here in America, but it's really just cool to see that there's an outside setting where everyone's just conversing, having a good time, and selling these fish. And yeah, that setting to me is just really special.
that's really cool. So I like the fact that even though you don't like the fish, you love the setting and the part of the culture because it is important to many Bengali people. That's really nice to be able to not feel something yourself, but to identify as being central to a culture and appreciate it. There's something to learn there. Awesome. Thank you so much. And
Thank
for following
you.
my diet. I want Mangsho now. We'll on Facebook. Everyone's gonna come to your house. You need to.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. That was awesome. I am so hungry. But our next speaker, Ronak Dave. His story is called Music Changed My Life. Hi, Ronak.
Hey.
So, a little bit about Ronak. He is 16. He's from Westboro, Mass. He sings, plays the ukulele, draws, and here's the thing, he says he is an ambivert, which is both an introvert and an extrovert, which is an awesome word. I did not know that before. Thank you. He tells me his pet peeve is being interrupted, and he thinks that overthinking is kind of a waste of time and overrated, which I totally agree with. I'm an overthinker. I waste most of my life, I will admit. Oh, and he once worked at Kumon for a short time, which is the math tutoring service. So he's an interesting person, Ronak. Now, he has a very interesting story for us today, which is about language, but it may not be the kind of language that you think. I'm going to let him tell it to us. It's called Music Changed My Life. Take it away, Ronak.
Thank you. গানের ভিতর দিয়ে যখন দেখি ভুবন খানি. Through my music, that's how I see the universe. তখন তারে চিনি আমি, তখন তারে জানি, গানের ভিতর দিয়ে যখন দেখি ভুবন খানি. You really wouldn't know this by looking at me now, but when I was really little, I couldn't speak at all. I mean, I spoke absolute gibberish, no more than 3 or 4 words. Of course, this worried my very perfectionist Bengali mother so much that she had to ask herself, আমার ১.৫ বছরের ছেলেটা কেন কথা বলতে পারছে না? উফ বাবা. So, in this sheer fright, she had to find the root of the problem. Because of course there was a problem. So at 1.5 years old, I was diagnosed with speech delay and I was assigned a speech therapist. I mean, of course, I really don't remember any of this, but apparently, what would happen is the speech therapist, he would ask me questions and I would understand them. I was just completely and blatantly uninterested in responding to him. All I wanted to do was sing head, shoulders, knees, and toes. And that's only because it was a song. I mean, it really doesn't make that much sense to me now, seeing as I'm giving a public speech right now. But I mean, my mom always had a little flair for the dramatic. But music, I'd found my thing. I mean, you really wouldn't guess that with the 3 different types of music I learned, and definitely not the 4 different instruments. Definitely not a humble brag. But I think my music journey, a big part of it started when my brother used to sing. My older brother Jeet used to learn how to sing, and I used to sing along with him and chime in on certain words. I mean, as his brother, it was my sole and only duty to annoy him, so it was a win-win situation. I also remember when I was really little, I had this tiny purple toy piano that I would drag absolutely everywhere, and I mean everywhere. I would sit in front of the bathroom door and scream until somebody would place me on the toilet. Then I would bang away at the keys for hours on end. Of course, I had no idea what I was doing, but at least I was cute while doing it. It became abundantly clear that music was a big part of my life, and that it was something I truly loved. I think my connection to music is one of the big things that helped me learn how to talk. It's weird because most people, they learn how to talk and then they go on to sing. But in my case, singing is the one thing that helped me learn how to talk. But you're probably wondering what any of this has to do with today's topic, how being Indian affected my life. But the truth is, these 2 things are completely intertwined for me. As time went on, I got into various different types of music. I started off with Robindra Sangit singing Amar bela je jai saj belate tomar shure shure shur melate. And then I went on to do Hindustani classical music. And now I'm even doing Italian operas at school, singing Per la gloria d'adorarvi. Take that, Mom, talking about speech delay. But when you really break down music to its foundations, you find that all it is just a set of frequencies. It's us people who have been able to communicate so much through these set frequencies. We're able to share so much emotion and so much culture. Take a harmonium and a piano, for example. Those 2 instruments are so similar. They have keys and they play the same notes, yet they're so different at the same time. That's because they represent 2 completely different cultures, 2 completely different types of music. And these differences are what make our separate cultures so beautiful. But the similarities are what connect our cultures together. And I can say the same thing about Do Re Mi Fa Sol La Ti Do and Sa Re Ga Ma Pa Dha Ni Sa. They're the same exact notes, just in a different language. And off of these same 7 notes, every musician builds their bass. And with that, musicians are given their own language, which supersedes any other language or any other culture. And that's how musicians are able to communicate with each other so well. Music has been my way of connecting to my heritage so well, and it's been something that I truly love. My brother abruptly stopped speaking Bengali, and I think a big part of that was because he was so scared of being mocked for his accent. I think so many kids today face that the same exact problem. I mean, I still face it too today, but I think my music is the one thing that helped me through that so much. I've been speaking Bengali in my music since I can remember, and that's given me the confidence and the practice I needed to keep on going. I know my Bangla isn't perfect, but I try hard, and it's been a great connector to my culture. I think finding yourself is a process, and it's a natural one. You don't force someone into that. And I think that's how I fell into music, naturally. And with that, I was given such a great environment and I was nurtured so well, and that developed my love for music. Music helped me talk, music helped me express myself, music helped me connect to my culture. But most importantly, music changed my whole life. Thank you for listening to my story.
Oh my goodness. Ronak, that was really something.
Thank you.
I don't know if I've seen or heard a better example of how everything can be different and everything can be the same. Like this was a shining, and just to hear you sing like that, oh my goodness, I'm choking up a little bit here. But okay, I will not be dramatic like your mom. You're really catching it for that one. Just you wait. Okay. So the question that I had thought to ask you is, didn't you say at some point, like, take that or so much for speech delays or something, mom? You did, right?
Yeah.
So as a parent, I can really relate to that, your toddler not speaking and all the worries, but then to see you take off the way you did and to be telling the story today, I can't even imagine how she must be feeling, how full her heart is. What I was wondering is you said something towards the end about you falling into music as if it's this warm, enveloping bath that you just splashed into, and about how it helped you express yourself. Do you think this had anything to do with the speech delay, this love that you have, the facility that you have with music? Do you think there's a connection?
Yeah, because I feel like even the speech delay, a big part of that was because I grew up in a two-language household. So I
Yeah.
was always hearing Bengali and English. But one language that always stuck with me was music. I always had that for myself. And I think that's why it always stuck with me, because it was my first way of communicating. And it's grown to become such an important part of my life now.
Uh-huh.
And it's just become that. I use music every day now in chorus, in violin. It's so important to me now, and I think it just sprouted from that spot.
Wow. And all these different kinds of music, you're singing in different languages. Like you said, the scales are the same, but you mentioned violin, ukulele, you
Mhm.
in your that's really cool. Thank you so much for sharing our story. I think we're all going to be thinking about different things that you've said, but we're so proud of you. People who
Thank
don't know
you.
you are going to feel very proud of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, kiddo. And with that, we have reached the midpoint of our show. I hope everyone has been enjoying this as much as I have. I thought I knew a little bit of these stories, but our tellers have just blown it out of the water. This has been so much fun for me. We're going to take a very short 2 or 3 minute break, during which we're going to be showing you some trailers, which have clips from past shows. We encourage you to please go check out our website. You'll be seeing a slide in a second. If you have story ideas, again, please come pitch them to us. Our website is offkendrick.com. There should be a slide coming up at some point that shows you it. And enjoy the trailers, and we will see you back in about 3 minutes so we can continue with our show. Thank you so much. So this is the link where you can go find out about our shows and email us if you'd like. And next, we're going to start some trailers.
It was 1999.
It was the summer of 2006.
And I moved to the US in the middle of November. I asked Bono, why did you say your dad sells shoes? Because shoes are important. They keep us safe, give us support, and protect us from germs. And Dada does all that for me. At that moment, I wish I had captured somehow the look on Debudi's face. It was this mixture of wonder, pride, satisfaction, joy. It was as if Bono had waved a magic wand and all his disappointment melted away. At that moment, all the hard work, the adjustments, uprooting and rebooting of ourselves seemed worth it. He was his son's hero. That was all that mattered.
It's to be doctors since a young age. How many of you have asked your kids to be engineers? How many of you have asked your kids to be something in the STEM fields? Now, those are all very, very good professions. I have no doubt about that. But how many of you have asked your kids to be artists, to be musicians, to be philosophers, to be politicians? See, that's a problem. Because all of your children are very talented. There's no doubt about that. But not all of your children are most talented as biologists or computer scientists.
Sometimes we'd go to the Robertson's Hill, where two angry bull terriers awaited us trapped in an electric fence. We tread quietly, lightly up the hill, get as close to the dogs as possible, and then sprint back down as they bolted after us, trying to bite us. The worst bite led to my frantic Didum, my grandma, trying to figure out how to rush me to the hospital. She's from Kolkata, she can't drive.
All right, and with that, we are back. I hope you enjoyed the trailers, and I hope you had a short break and you're ready to listen to the next set of storytellers. Coming up next, our next teller is Ravi Popat, who is coming to us from all the way over in the UK. Hi, Ravi, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Oceans apart, literally.
I know.
Ravi is 26 years old. He's a consultant located in the greater New York City area, and he's joining us today from England, where he grew up. Now, he does have ties to Boston. He was a local when he went to Tufts for college. And interestingly, he studied issues related to Asian migration. Now, he continues to volunteer around those issues, so he's really trying to bring about change, which is very impressive. An interesting tidbit about Ravi is that he dances the garba, which is a very athletic, graceful, rhythmic form of dance from Western India, right, Ravi? Gujarat.
Yep.
And he does it well enough that he was on the university team. There's a lot of competitive garba in the US in collegiate level. So I'm sure the man's got some moves and I'd love to see them one day.
Yeah, one day.
So Ravi's story today is touching. I found it not entirely easy to hear, but I'm really, really glad I did. And I can't wait for you to hear it. He calls it, "Where are you from?" And so here you go, Ravi, take it away.
In my sophomore year of college, I had the distinct pleasure of sharing a triple. For those of you who may not know, a triple is a single room shared by 3 people, and in my case, 3 college boys. During one of many, many FIFA games with my roommate, Sharon, we began discussing Bombay, his hometown, and a place where a lot of my family lives too. So we were, discussing mutual spots that we had both been to, liked, and tried out. Eventually, the conversation shifted to what it meant to be Indian overall. It was a casual conversation, but at that point, Sharon turned to me, seemingly enlightened by a thought that had just popped into his head. And he looks at me and he says, "But bro, you're not really Indian, are you? Like, you're kind of French, British, and American." A harmless comment to him, but it ignited a fire that had been quietly burning within me for years. My mind flashed back to England, where both me and my dad grew up, and the experiences we had had. Growing up, many kids who live in major cities take public transport to school. Growing up in London, my dad, he was no different. His journey was short. He would walk from his house on Shakespeare Drive, take the little hill up the mall, and then take a right and walk down Preston Road. Then he would reach the tube stop. From there, he would take the train 2 stops inbound to Wembley Park, where he would disembark and walk to school. It was a simple, uneventful journey. It took about 25 minutes door to door. And when you think about the return trip, you would think, well, it should be the same. He'd leave school at Wembley High and walk to the tube stop where he'd take the reverse Metropolitan line train back to Preston Road. But you see, the way back was different. Because as we know, after school, there are no rules. And this was England in the 1970s. Margaret Thatcher's rule was just beginning. And Enoch Powell's River of Blood speech was still streaming throughout households across the United Kingdom, invoking fear and hatred of mass migration. Now, for those of you who are familiar with the Metropolitan line, you will know that now trains are newer and the light fixtures are fixed into the trains themselves. But 40 years ago, it was different. The lights on the train were similar to the lights that you might have at home. You know, the ones that you screw in and out of the ceiling. Wembley Park to Preston Road, where my dad would get off on the way back, is 2 stops. Between those 2 stops, the train is largely overground, as trains and tubes tend to be in suburban London. But there are 2 portions of the journey where the train shoots through tunnels, descending into darkness, lit only by the flickering bulbs that we just discussed. The train is running quick, flicking through trees, football fields, and suburban landscape. And then, all of a sudden, you're surrounded by nothing, just darkness. Out of the corner of your eye, you see 3 boys get up. You know them well from school. Mark, David, John. heads shaved, all wearing the same black steel-capped Doc Martens, shoes that have left many a mark on your body. Before you know it, one of them is unscrewing the light bulb, plunging the train into complete darkness, while another one screams, "Get the packies!" You never know who lands the first blow or launches the last kick. It's pitch black, after all. You try to fight back, but 3-on-1, it's not really a fight, is it? And then, after what feels like hours, the train emerges from the tunnel. The beating stops, and the light bulb is miraculously back in place. The train ride back to normal. So my dad decided to change his journey home with the hope of a different end result. He began walking home from school. But funnily enough, so did Mark, David, and John. Now, fortunately, Dad was rather slight as a child, which meant he had good foot speed, and you probably wouldn't guess that now if you looked at him. So when the three of them would chase him home, he'd usually be able to strip them for pace, outrunning the heavy thuds of the black lace-up boots that would eventually fade into the distance. To this day, my dad remembers their names and faces. He wants to see them again, show them how far he has come, face up to them, and no longer run away. The England my dad grew up with was in many ways different from the one I grew up in. And at the same time, there was still a lot that remained the same. I didn't attend his London comprehensive state school, but instead I went to a small, all-boys private school, 50 miles north of London. It was called Bedford Prep. Dad's high school was founded in 1934, and to be completely honest, there was nothing particularly distinguishing about it. A few buildings with little soul or character. Bedford, on the other hand, was founded in 1086. Yeah, you heard me correctly, 1086. We had a chapel, an observatory, a planetarium, as well as many other state-of-the-art facilities. We had houses, too, for which we earned points through a series of tasks, events, and competitions. And to top it all off, we had rigid uniform requirements. All boys under the age of 11 were year-round required to wear a shirt, sweater, and tie, which had a stripe across it according to the house that you belonged to, as well as shorts and stockings. Essentially, Bedford was Hogwarts on steroids. My favorite time of day was lunchtime. You could always find me by the science labs with a few of my very close friends playing cricket. As a youngster, I fancied myself quite a bit as a cricketer and was often keen to show off my skills to the older boys. One particular day, after an impressive showing, lunch break was coming to an end, and I was feeling a cricketer's high. I'm sure some of you have felt the same. As I walked back to class with a few of my friends, we began making plans for after school. Nick, one of the boys in my group, began inviting everyone over. He said we'd play video games and his mum would make us snacks. I mean, that sounds like every 10-year-old's dream. But then he stopped and turned towards me. He hesitated for a second and then said with a grin on his face, "Ravi, I don't think you should come. My dad said he'll shoot any packies with a shotgun." I stood there in shock, as I'm sure many of you would have. Had you been in my place, what would you have said? Was he joking? I couldn't tell. What was I supposed to say? Before I had a chance to gather my thoughts and think of an adequate response, he'd run back to class. In a way, Sharon was right. I had never lived in India. My Gujarati and Hindi, although good, will never be as good as someone who grew up there. And even if it were good enough, my friends and I, we still speak that funny Gujarati. You know, the Gujarati with a strong English accent, with some East African vocab littered into the mix. For us, it was game cho, not gemcho. Kidney beans are bhanda, not rajma. A plate is a sani, not a thali. Our traditions are often considered outdated, remnants of the beliefs and customs of my ancestors who left India many, many generations ago. My same ancestors who traversed through Africa, who found themselves in England. But on the other hand, I think back to the experiences of me and my dad, of being labeled Paki, of being brown in a white man's England, of being Indian in England. I doubt Sharon was reminded of his otherness every day, of his Indian identity every day. So in many ways, I feel more Indian than Sharon ever will. The truth is, I've never felt at home in any one country. I'm not white enough for England and not brown enough for India. My identity is a tapestry woven by Indian tailors, sewed with African fabrics, and exported and sold in England. There is no one place that calls me their own, and I'm okay with that. Thank you. I think you're on mute, Chandri, sorry.
Thank you so much. I was too caught up in that story. Gosh, that train scene that you described with your dad.
Yeah.
I feel like the wind's gone out of my system. And I have friends who grew up, Gujarati friends who grew up in England in the 70s. And I've heard these stories before, but somehow every time you hear it fresh, this is the power of bearing testimony and hearing about real life experiences. And I'm just so sorry you had to go through that. Your dad had to go through that. And I'd like to say that I'm surprised that you had to go through it all those years later when supposedly things had changed, but
yeah,
I'm not surprised. Are you? I mean,
no, not really, to be honest. And I think, you know, I would love that my kids don't have to go through it, but I'm sure they'll go through something in their own way as well.
I know. And you know, I don't want to sound dismal and depressing and as if we're giving up. And the thing I wanted to ask you is, ostensibly your story is about, look, nothing changed. Yet, in the bio that I read out about you, that you told me about, something little had changed. Look at what you do. Look at what you studied. And so I want to ask, what happened? How did it change you to not just see what happened to your dad, but to have it done to you again? How did that change you?
I think, you know, growing up, it was one of those things where this wasn't part of the story, but when I got called Paki, I told one of the teachers, and I actually got a detention for quote unquote lying, which is even more shocking. But I think in those moments, you know, we were always just taught, take it on the chin up and, you know, walk on and, you know, take it as you will. And I think it's built in a bit of resilience, but it also makes you think constantly. I think growing up, I didn't really feel that Indian, especially because I was always in schools where I was one of 2 or 3 in my entire school. I always went to, you know, typically small schools in sort of non-Indian enclaves or areas. So, you know, I think it's helped me. And then when I came to university, I was surrounded by more people from what I would say my community, not just Gujaratis, but, you know, like I mentioned, Sharon and Gautam, who's going next, was the 3rd person in the room who lived with us. So just people from different Indian backgrounds and experiences. So it really opened my eyes that a lot of us have been through similar things, but in very different sort of locations or areas. And I think it's always sort of, now that I've had time to think about it, and it's just something, you know, we had maybe discussed a little bit, is that I'm constantly thinking of, you know what, every day, and this is something a professor told me as when we do our acts of going to Monday, or if we're cooking our foods or whatever, it's a small act of resistance, right, against what is considered normative in the US. And so we are constantly resisting conforming, which I think is a great thing. And I think we're actually embrace our identity a lot more than people who don't necessarily have to do these things as small acts of resistance as well.
So you're actually saying this horrible thing that you had to face historically, your dad, you're already saying your kids, you're actually spinning this and you're saying, yeah, of course it sucks, but it's making me resist and take back what I can. Do you have hope that things are going to change?
I have hope things will change eventually, but I think as a community, right, I'm seeing now more and more mobilization from within, people who are becoming more and more proud of their identity. And I think that's where it starts, right? I think looking back on it, I wish my dad had taught me in that situation, maybe not throw a punch, but say something back, don't be ready to fight back. And I think we're getting better at these things. I'm seeing, kids standing up for themselves more and advocating for themselves more. So I'm really excited to see what the future sort of holds, and especially for the youngsters who are going before us. Like, I think they're really starting to come into their own as a sort of South Asian community growing up in the US.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. This is just, your story is so full of despair and at the same time brimming with hope, simply because of who you seem to be today. And this is what happened in your past. Not to romanticize it. None of this is okay. None of this is good. But, there is hope. I also love the fact that you said that you had to prove your Indianness. And in many ways, you feel more Indian than your friends who are not called upon to explain themselves. Who are you? Nah, you're not Indian, So it's awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for this chat too. I'm hoping it helps other people get a little bit of an insight into the story you just told us, and have a good vacation. The rest of it, stay safe.
Of course. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ravi. Whew. Thanks. And we are now at the last teller of the day. Thank you so much for sticking with us. If you have stuck with us the whole time, I hope that this has been a great experience. Our next teller is Shayok Chakraborty, hi Shayok. Shayok is also one of our curators today. He is partly responsible for bringing you these amazing stories and finding these tellers. So thank you already for that, Shayok. It's been an amazing show. A little bit about him. Shayok grew up in California and LA, and hold on to your hats and clutch your pearls, New Englanders, because this man dares to say that it's the better coast. Yeah. You're muted, and that's a good thing. I'm sorry.
Well, it's true. I don't apologize. I'm just honest, right?
Good for you. You shouldn't apologize. Sure. I think the best coast is the Bengal coast, so there you go.
Okay. All right. Fair.
But we let him on this show because he's a great guy. He's actually a community organizer, and he works really hard for change. As I told you, he's made time in his busy schedule to do this for us. A few interesting things about him. Well, the most interesting thing is that he calls himself a mesho, which is translated as like an old fuddy-duddy or like a grandpa character. It's Bengali for uncle, and he says he likes listening to old Indian music, Kishore Kumar songs. He wears flip-flops, which is a very Bengali thing to always wear flip-flops, over trendy kicks. And he has a lot of political opinions, some of them angry. So he is the stereotypical Bengali, and he is also a mesho or an uncle, and I love that about him.
I'm very surprised you let me on the show for the second gen, performance, but it's okay. No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, well, us oldies can be like that. In our dotage, we made bad decisions. But,
right.
We will hear from Shayok, and then please don't leave, because I have just a little bit after that. And we've been saving, actually, it's not in any particular order. All the stories are great, but Shayok's going to leave you with what we think is going to be the culmination of a long journey that you've been on with us today. So here's Shayok. His story is called Discovering America. Over to you, Shayok.
Thanks. Just like all of us immigrants and children of immigrants, I've had to discover America piece by piece. And it should be obvious why the immigrant generation has to discover America, but even for us first generation kids, we have our own revelations to make. Unlike Black and white Americans who may have been here for multiple generations, Our parents really can't tell us what American public schools are going to be like, what Americans think about and care about, and how they will perceive us. Those are discoveries that we mostly have to make on our own. And I'm lucky. In many ways, my discovery process has been good through my childhood. So all through growing up, I knew America as the land of opportunity because I'd seen it in my own life. My parents have a pretty classic story from a lot of ways. My parents came here with $50 in their pocket. You know, they went from babysitter and pizza man to solid middle-class life in LA. My public schools give a good education to children of immigrants like me. I got the chance to study hard and make my parents proud, all while avoiding the police corruption, the broken healthcare system, and the dysfunctional education system that my mom and baba would shake their heads and tell me about all throughout my childhood. And then at other points, that discovery process of America has been incredibly painful. I remember one moment in particular that started with my mom in 2004. And she was walking through a quiet neighborhood in Los Angeles. She was wearing a sari and speaking in Bengali with her friends. She was very clearly ethnic. And there was an older white woman outside. She was gardening. My mom and her friend accidentally stepped on her grass. And this woman turns on them. She says, "What are you doing on my lawn? You dirty Indians. You people come in here with your stink up this neighborhood with your curry smell, and you go to this Hindu temple down the street. I don't even know what you do there. You should just get the hell out of my country." Get out of my country. Those are timeless words. The reaction of my mom's friends was fear. That's timeless as well. "Moitre, let's go," they said. But she did not go. She looked at this woman and she said, "How dare you speak to me like that? How dare you speak to me like that? I'm an American too. You cannot talk to me like that." Suddenly, this woman pulls out her garden hose and she sprays them down in the middle of the street. That only made my mom even more angry. Even as her friends were crying, urging her to leave, she told this woman, "How dare you? How dare you? I'm calling the police on you right now." And the woman storms back into her house. She curses my mom out as she's doing that, closes the door. My mom calls LAPD. "Well, ma'am," said a bored voice on the other line, "are you physically hurt?" "Well, no, but she called me a dirty Indian and she hosed me." "Yeah, I mean, that's not a criminal offense, ma'am. We really can't do anything about that." "What do you mean it's not a criminal offense? This is a hate crime. You better come here right now or this story is going to be on LA Times tomorrow. I promise you that." And so 2 police officers actually did end up coming. And they knocked on the door once, twice, but no response. At least there was a response from the authorities, though. So my mom was willing to go home. The next day, my mom got a call from the police station. It was the old woman. She'd written her a letter of apology, very clearly the kind of careful garbage that you would write if you're trying not to get sued. My mom didn't even take the letter. But I wasn't actually there for any of that. I don't remember my mother's declaration that she was an American or her standing up to the police. I just remember being 8 years old, watching from inside the house as my mom paced up and down in the backyard. And she was sobbing. She's still wearing her wet sari, talking to a friend, and she's saying, "How can this happen here? How can this happen here?" And I was confused, bewildered, and most of all, powerless. And even now, I'm at awe of what mom did. My mother has her brown skin, her accent. Her first plane ride was when she came to this country at a mere 21 years old, but that did not mean that she was not an American. We are Indian Americans. We have a seat at the table too, even if that means we must sometimes demand it, like my mom did. And yet, I will also always remember the powerlessness of that moment. Being 8 years old, being a child, watching my mother cry and not knowing what to do, knowing that it was because we were Indian. That has stayed with me. That day, we both discovered a piece of America together as mother and son. I learned about America again on November 9th, 2016, the day that Donald Trump was elected. And I remember sitting in this dark, crowded, sweaty basement at Pomona College in California. And the room was milling about with anxious students. And we're all staring at this huge pull-down screen in the front of the room, CNN blaring out results state by state. On my left sat my best friend, an undocumented Mexican-American guy who grew up in the Deep South. He's one of the most brilliant students of history that I know, and he would not have gotten even the chance of higher education in this country had it not been for the DACA program. And on my right was my girlfriend at the time, an African-American who's now doing amazing things in tech, who used to sit on the school bus and take the N-word from white bullies, and sometimes even from the bus driver himself. All of us watching, hoping, eventually panicking. And I vividly remember walking back that night with those friends. I remember the fear about what would happen to mamashis and meshos like after 9/11, and having to ask my best friend, do I have your mom's number in case ICE comes for you on campus? Once again, my world had changed. It felt so personal. Half the country would have voted for a man who would have revoked my birthright citizenship, deported my best friend, and blocked my own parents from ever immigrating here in the first place if Trump had his way. And it was more than just painful, it was insulting. So I responded with defiance this time, like my mother had. I was consumed by a singular thought that my parents had not come to this country for this. Over the next few years, I plunged myself into community organizing. I founded a student organization that fought for Sanctuary City in my LA County college town. We organized 200 students and community members to demonstrate at the city council vote, and we won. We founded a local affordable housing coalition. We organized legal clinics to provide legal aid to undocumented local neighbors. And it gave me some sense of life and purpose to fight and achieve concrete progress towards the America that I knew we could be, that I had known early in my life, against the America that had been revealed to me over time. It has been 4 years now. Now I'm a full-time community organizer with the Greater Boston Interfaith Organization, which is a 40,000 strong citizens power organization that works with ordinary leaders in churches, mosques, synagogues, and neighborhoods to fight for justice. And I have seen America through many eyes now, through the eyes of the homeless man, denied basic bathroom access due to a city government's neglect for the need for portable toilets during the pandemic, or the Black nurse pushing for police reform, whose son was assaulted on his way home from the bodega, had his head slammed into the concrete by 3 police officers, or the Bangladeshi mother in public housing, who could not get her driver's license because the state of Massachusetts has neglected to provide a Bangla RMV test option. Through all of this and so much more, I've discovered quite a lot about America. And then George Floyd was killed. And once again, I found myself horrified and furious. But this time, anger and horror were accompanied by a hint of something more sinister. Weariness. Weariness. Just that sinking feeling that maybe things just were not going to change. One day while working on our statewide police reform campaign, I had a conversation about this with a GBIO leader named Phil. And Phil's 72 years old. He's a Black man, the son of a union postal worker in Chicago, and he's a leader in his church. He's got an easy smile, launches into a story at the drop of a hat, and he's the sort of man who would never tell you himself that he's the chair of 3 nonprofit boards in the city of Boston and a retired Polaroid executive to boot. One day during a planning call, I told him, Phil, it gets so tiring sometimes for me, and I'm 23 years old and I'm Indian. You're 72 years old and Black. How do you keep your spirits up in times like this? And Phil sighed, and he thought for a moment. Well, he said, it's really hard sometimes. And he told me about the fear he'd felt as a young man in Chicago when 3 police officers had pulled guns on him and his friends just because they, quote, fit the description. He told me about a conversation he'd had just recently with his 12-year-old grandson, who asked him, Papa, when are they going to stop killing us? You have to remember that the clay cannot tell the potter how it wishes to be molded. God sees farther than any of us, and we can't always know why something happens today. But you've got to have faith. You've got to have faith. You've got to believe in something deep. Some things are just true, and truth wins out in the end. And I thought a lot about what Phil had said. He was right. Some things are just true. And it's not about religion necessarily, but about placing your belief in something that is worth seeing through to the end. It reminds me of that famous saying that faith sees best in the dark. You don't need faith when the road is clear and victory is assured. You need it in the darkness of a year like 2020, where we're in the midst of a pandemic. We see racism all around us, alive and well. When climate change and inequality are bearing down on us, and Trump really might come back for a second term if we are not careful. That's when we are at the highest danger of burning out. 2020 is not over. I know I've discovered enough about America to take a side and to stay in it for the long haul. Have you? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shayok. There was so much in that talk. I'm pretty sure everyone's head is buzzing. That was everything that you said, and all your realizations were completely power-packed. It's hard for me to erase from my mind that image of your humiliated mother. She's so graceful, she's so beautiful, she's so wise. To think of her pacing up and down in that soaking wet sari and just saying, how could this happen? It's like an echo through the ages, because like you said, George Floyd happens and we're like, how can this happen again and again and again? So there's that, the fact that you were saying that you didn't even, you remember that's burnt into your brain. You don't remember the actual event, but you remember her humiliation. And then later on, you say that the thing about having faith in the darkness, to believe in something deep. I was wondering, those are kind of two competing beliefs. Have faith that things will change, but on the other hand, you told us a story that showed you over time that nothing changed, or at least these important things did not change. How do you reconcile the two? I mean, it's obvious that you are who you are in part because of the things that have happened to you and the things that you've witnessed, but how do you reconcile these two ideas, faith and action?
Right. Oh, that's real. Thank you for appreciate that question. And I think that when I was reflecting on it, I think that that story, of me, like what I'm doing right now is rooted in what happened then, right? And those moments like that 8-year-old child is still there, right? In me somewhere. And that feeling of powerlessness and humiliation, and also just knowing that my mom she did that. She really stood up to that man, to that woman. And just having those examples within me, it kind of gives me an organic base of empathy and anger, frankly, that I can pull from, right? Because I don't want to see other people have that kind of an experience, right? And I think that's probably true for so many of the speakers here today, of so many of the audience members, folks who experience that kind of powerlessness in whatever way that you have, right? But of course, anger is not enough. It cannot, it's an intense emotion. You cannot keep that up all the time. You will burn yourself out.
It burns out, yeah.
Burns out, right? And that's where faith comes in. That's where you just have to believe in something really true, just real. I mean, so an example of that, like everybody has worth, right? That's just a basic thing. And you see that in every, it's something you uphold in everything you do. And it's not enough to just believe that in sort of in a high-minded philosophical way. It's rooted in those experiences, the experiences of being that 8-year-old child, for example, right? Not wanting to feel like that. I wanted to see other kids feel like that, right? And so it's kind of like letting those things feed you and be in you, those painful experiences, that anger, to be called upon at any time. But ultimately, it is faith in that deeper thing, that longer out thing that's going to keep you going in the highs and lows, right?
Right. I hear you. So if you were to just reach for the anger, that could actually sap you.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
You need the faith to say that I will do something and it will change something. It may not be immediate. It may not be something I can hold in my hands right now or see with my eyes. That's extremely powerful. And I think it's really hard to keep sight of this when you're really in pain, when you're watching people suffer. But I think it's so important to have this kind of balance. And reconciling two competing objectives. That's absolutely fantastic. And yeah, it's so timely. I'm so glad you talked to us about this and you shared this. And thank you for doing what you're doing. Shayok did want to put out a little call to action. He told me before that if any of you feel from hearing any of these stories motivated to act for change, reach out to him, reach out to us, and we'll connect you to him. He does a lot of activism. We have a lot of people today who I'm hoping will be touched by these stories. There's nothing, I feel like there's not anything really new we've heard today. We know all these things in some shapes or forms, but when someone tells you their own lived experience, it assumes a different form, right? It's not the same as being a theoretical thing you read in the paper. And I really hope we all take a little bit of this away in our hearts. Thank you again so much, Shai, for everything you do in your story.
Thank you so much, Chandimashi. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you. And with that, we are at the end of our show, but we are not yet done, or I'm not done with you yet. So at this point, I'd like to ask all of our tellers to please turn on their cameras and come back on screen with us so that everyone who's watching on Facebook can see us and remember your faces and remember little bits from your stories. There we go, we're all showing up. It's time for me to call an end to this, but before that, I'd like to share one little thought with you. I'm not a storyteller today, but I've had the incredible privilege of speaking to these people and hearing their stories the same as you. And one thing I've been thinking is, since we lost Justice Ginsburg, which was a devastating loss to many, many of us, one thing, there's a really interesting thing that's been happening. My social media feed has been filling up, like I think yours, some of yours might be too, with this very interesting message. It is, today we grieve and tomorrow we fight. And collectively, the stories that we hear today, it just seems like somebody turned up the volume and just amplified everything that's packed into that one little phrase. And I don't think it's a coincidence that we have first generation speakers who spoke about so many different things, but who completely echo this thought. We heard about people who were grieving the pain and the humiliation that was caused to their parents, and who were actually reaching for that source of pain to enact change. We heard about people trying to carve out identity and resist, like Billy said to Shayok, resist everything is an act of resistance. Resist the stereotypes and carve out a space for you to be exactly who you are and not who you expect people to be. And by doing things like that, you are changing the future for everyone who's going to come behind you. The three older people we have here are blazing the trail for the three younger tellers we have here. And then we have the younger tellers. They're not even adults yet, but I totally feel schooled in the fine art of making connections. Because I feel like we were told how to connect through a shared passion and make a connection between two people, a mother and a son. I felt like I learned how music is a language of connection. It's not just a shared passion, it's actually a way of expressing yourself. Food and family and traditions, and again, identity. The story about food was also a story about identity. These are ways of pulling people together and building community and bridging gaps. And our younger tellers, I think, told us about hope. The older tellers towards the end, I think they talked to us about resilience, about courage, and about change. And you connect all these dots together, and I'm right now just swelling with power and hope. And it's an old cliche that youth holds the key. But somehow what I'm left with is, look hard at yourself. We all have a copy to the key that these young people hold. And I'm just so proud that they have just reminded us of that fact. So I thank all the tellers for taking us on this journey with you. I know some of these stories were not easy to tell, to relive. I thank all the audience members by choosing to be here, for tuning in even for part of the show. If that's what you did, you made a choice to bear witness, to want to know, to bridge some gaps. And that is where it's at. Thank you so much for helping us make this happen, for being part of this. It's time for some acknowledgements, because these things don't happen in a vacuum. First of all, the director of this show, Shankar Bhomik, who also happens to be our artistic director for Afkendrick, the group that's bringing you this show. He was assisted in direction by Mohua Sen, who is the president of Afkendrick, coincidentally. They've both worked really hard to put this show together. We've had technical assistance, without which we'd be dead in the water, from Debraj Roy and from Shobhik Gangopadhyay. The wizard behind the scenes who's making all of this happen is Arup De. Arup, if you could turn on your camera, because you are on Zoom, it would be nice to see your face. He's making it all happen, and he's been up into the wee hours to have things happen. There he is. Actually, Oyan Ganguly, who happens to be my son, for making a couple of those trailers. We really wanted this to be an all-around first-generation effort, and that was his little bit. The Waltham Cultural Council, who actually, when we were going to do this live in March, they showed their trust and their support of us by giving us a grant, which we were unable to use since we did not have a live show, but we do support their confidence in us, and we hope we'll be able to partner with them again in future. And last but not least, all the members of Afkendrick who helped this happen, getting the word out, the 1,000 little things behind the scenes. And again, thank you everyone for being here. Tellers, audience, let's do this again. Please keep telling your story. Please keep listening to your stories. Grieve, then fight, fall, pick yourself up, and stay safe and wear those masks. Thank you so much.